Hello and welcome to MMA Crips Fighting Talk. On today's show, we'll be going 3 rounds of action, featuring Jake Shields is a free agent, Melvin Guillard signs with World Series of Fighting, and Gina Carano set to meet with Dana White tonight. Okay, joining me on today's show, all the way from Canada, Mr. Derek Love. Welcome to MMA Crips Fighting Talk, Derek.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
It's my pleasure, Derek. Okay, starting things out in round 1, and Jake Shields is a free agent. It was announced 2 days ago that top-ranked welterweight Jake Shields was cut from the UFC roster and is now a free agent. Now, we might as well start there, Derek. What do you make of the UFC cutting Jake Shields?
I think this is an excellent move by the UFC. Probably the most boring fighter on the roster. Hasn't really convincingly won a fight in years. Getting paid a good sum of money. And the guy hasn't improved in literally like 6 years. It's just trimming the fat, and he had to go.
So you're a big fan of it then, Derek?
I am. It sucks for Jake Shields as a fighter. Like, I know he's got family to support and everything.
Yeah.
But if you want to be in the UFC, you got to improve. You got to prove that you're the best. You can't be just winning decisions, boring split decisions by that means. Yeah, I thought, I didn't know they were going to do this, but I thought this would be the right move.
See, for me, it's like, you mentioned boring. Now, shouldn't we be looking at the win-loss ratio and who you're fighting and who you're beating and who you're losing to, rather than how you actually, entertain people in the cage? Now, obviously, yes, the UFC, they have to sell pay-per-views, they have to sell the tickets, they have to put asses in seats. But, geez, shouldn't the fans be there for, the actual fights? Like, whoa, Jake Shields, one of the best grapplers around. Can he really, defeat Damian Maia on the ground? Can he really control Damian Maia? Can he get past Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu? Can Damian Maia submit this world-class grappler in Jake Shields? That's what the fans should be saying. That's what the fans should be doing. They should be buying tickets to see that. But instead, they want to see knockouts. They want to see 5-second knockouts. They want to see blood. They want to see big fucking cuts in people's heads. That's the problem for me. And I feel like the UFC more recently have been basically changing the way the sport is. Now, you cut in world-class fighters like John Fitch, Yushin Okami, and now Jake Shields, some of the best fighters in the world. And guess what they all are? They're all grapplers. All grapplers who like to control the fight, and they like to control their opponents. Now, these guys shouldn't be getting cut because of the way they fight. It's wrong. And it really is. It's changing the way mixed martial arts is. Mixed martial arts used to be about who was the better fighter. Well, it started off with what is the better martial art, but now it's who is the better mixed martial artist. That's the reason we have belts, to see who is the best. Can this fighter work his way up the rankings to get to the belt? Now, the UFC have only just introduced the rankings. Yes, there is room for entertainment in mixed martial arts. There always is. But the bottom line is, the bread and butter of mixed martial arts should be the belts. Not who's the most entertaining fighter. Now, the good thing is, it's only the UFC what are heading in this direction. You got World Series of Fighting hanging around now. They're picking up these guys, and they're trying to get the best fighters and put on the best fights, and not trying to put on, the most spectacular fights of the night. You're going to get that. You're going to get that on the undercard fights, To me, mixed martial arts always gives you, whenever I watch a UFC event or a mixed martial arts event, it's always, I get a good mixture of action. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter about who's fighting for the title, what style they've got. They've earned the place there. And the craziest thing about this, Derek, I have to say, is if Jake Shields won, he could have been a number 1 contender if he won his last fight. That's just absolutely crazy. And now he's cut. Really? Is that the way the sport is going? Now, I mentioned that the UFC are changing the sport here, Derek, you know what I mean? They're turning it from who's the best fighter to who's the most entertaining fighter, in my opinion. Would you agree with that too, Derek?
Yeah, they are going down that road. Like you said, a grappler is more likely to be cut. Especially, Okami, Fitch, Shields. Those guys are the best. But Now, look what happened to John Fitch after he got cut. He went and has been average in the number 3 promotion in the world.
True.
So, is this really unjustified, or did Joe Silva see this coming? What would a top 10 guy in the UFC do to John Fitch if he can't even finish or convincingly beat some guy I've never heard of?
Well, does this just show that, mixed martial arts as a whole, even the top 3 promotions have really good fighters, world class fighters, to be honest with you. Does that
It,
not show that?
well, it's hard to say because the World Series of Fighting does have some really good fighters, but I can't even remember the guy's name who John Fitch beat by split decision, and a lot of people were saying that was a real close fight. If John Fitch can't convincing, like, if this guy was some undefeated prospect, I'd get it, but I'm pretty sure that guy had already been beaten before. Like, he's not a world class fighter like John Fitch is supposed to be, and John Fitch barely beats him. What
Well,
would Tyrone Woodley do to John Fitch?
well, we're sort of speculating here, but it is true what you say. He hasn't looked the best since leaving the UFC. But sometimes can't that just be like, the fighter's morale? Because you get cut from the UFC, it can affect your morale. Now, I lost to Josh Burtman. He got choked out where the referee took a long time to come in. Josh Burtman's a good fighter for me, but should he be beating John Fitch? No. The fighter who John Fitch just beat was Marcelo Alfaye. True, I don't have a clue who he is. I'm just going to check him out now. He's an American top Team Nogueira fighter. He's 35 years of age, obviously well experienced. He's had 23 fights, 15 victories, 7 losses, and 1 no contest. He had a recent loss to Jake Ellenberger, Bellator. Still, another fighter John Fitch should be really beaten comfortably. So, you are correct there, to be honest with you, Derek. But the point being, before he got cut from the UFC, if you look at his UFC record before he was cut, Damian Maia, a loss there. That's not too bad, let's be honest. Damian Maia, he is a contender. You had Eric Silva, he defeated Eric Silva. Johnny Hendricks, a loss there, champion. Draw against BJ Penn. It's really shaming that. But if you look at before that, he was on a 5 fight win streak against Gono, Paulo Thiago, Mike Pierce, Ben Saunders, and Thiago Alves. So to me, Derek, what it's looking like is what the fighter's actually on. Like, he's well paid, and because of his style. Now, that is good business for the UFC for the time being. It saves them on the pennies. But did he really need to save on the pennies, Derek? Like, these fighters are not getting paid like boxers.
You're right there. I'm not even sure how much John Fitch was making a fight.
You're probably looking about 40,000 average, I'd say. And then obviously a 40,000 win bonus. But obviously a UFC, they pull in millions of dollars on a gate. And if John Fitch is going to be like, co-main event, what is it? As soon as they lose the co-main event status and the main event status, they sort of like, he's on 40 grand, let's get rid of him.
Think about it like this. If you're paying John Fitch $80,000 to co-main event any card, do you think that much money is being made off of John Fitch? Because I'm betting if you're just talking about a UFC on Fox card or something, if he was on it, people are turning the TV to a different channel when he comes on. Anyone who knows who he is. Unless he's fighting a guy who's a great grappler and can, stop him from taking him down, you know what John Fitch is going to do. So guys are turning the TV off to a different channel until that fight is done because they think it's going to be boring as hell. Now, he had a decent fight with Mike Pierce, but that and the Eric Silva fight were the only 2 good fights he's had in the UFC. The rest of his fights are just like, no one wants to watch him. He's boring.
So you would lean towards more exciting fights than who the main contender is? Or do you just sort of see the UFC's point of view?
I agree with the UFC on cutting John Fitch just because he's not making the amount of money you're paying him.
Where do you think this leaves Nick Diaz? Obviously, he's a Cesar Gracie fighter. Trains with Jake Shields. They're both managed by Cesar Gracie. Now, obviously, Dana White said his problems with Nick Diaz. Shields is gone now, so do you think possibly this could hurt Nick Diaz too, in a way? Like, fuck, I don't need Nick Diaz anymore. I'm sick of his shit. He can fuck off with Jake. Do you think this could be the end of Nick Diaz too?
I honestly think even without Jake Shields being cut, that Nick, unless we really need a pay-per-view draw, that Dana White is already sick of Nick Diaz. Apparently, Dana White was talking to Nick Diaz about him fighting Hector Lombard. Nick Diaz said that, yeah, he liked that fight and never talked to Dana White about it again. So Nick Diaz doesn't want to fight. If he wanted to fight, he knows who to call. But to me, it sounds like Nick Diaz is just going to be a whiny little bitch, and, he's not getting a title shot. He's done.
Sounds like he's pissed Dana White off there because, damn, Hector Lombard, that's like the executioner.
Honestly, if it wouldn't shock me to find out that Nick Diaz was like, yeah, I like that fight, and then his coach was like, no, we don't like that fight. You're going to get killed.
I think so. Seriously, I like Nick Diaz's fighting style, but damn, if you get aggressive, start fucking poking your hands out, saying, come on, hit me, jeez, he's going to hit you and hit you hard. Damn.
Yeah, no, if Hector Lombard can throw Jake Shields around like he did, he's going to throw Nick Diaz around and probably snap him in half like a twig.
Well, damn, there we have it. That's an automatic storyline. He beat his teammate. That's perfect, Derek.
You know what? And that you could put that fight could co-main event a pay-per-view or headline a Fox card. That's a really good fight.
Well, it's better than Nick Diaz saying, I want a title shot when I return. Geez, Hector Lombard is more feasible.
If he beats Hector Lombard too, you could argue he deserves a title shot.
Correct. It is true. Fast track him.
Yeah, even though I don't think there's a chance in hell he'll beat Lombard. And you could also use that to put Lombard in a 5-round fight. Throw it as a main event somewhere. Put it as a main event. See if what Lombard does in 5 rounds. We could see Lombard gas and Nick Diaz finish him in the 5th. Because Nick Diaz can go for a month straight.
Well, let's move on to where Jake goes from here, Derek. World Series of Fighting seem to be, splashing the money recently on Top Talent. Would you put them in the front running for signing Jake Shields?
I would put them with a tie with ONE FC. I think ONE FC is going to be able to pay him more. And that's going to be a big thing. Because, Jake Shields is probably realizing he's done in the UFC. He's good chance he's not going to get back there if he goes and beats Askren or he goes and beats Paul Jarez, he might get a call back. But he's got to go beat somebody. And I'm thinking ONE FC is going to be paying a little better than World Series of Fighting is. So that might be the, deal breaker for World Series of Fighting.
Yeah, you see, I put them as the front running too. I didn't really factor in ONE FC like you, but I was thinking more Bellator. Now, Bellator, they like the tournaments, you know what I mean, and they like the big fights. But for me, World Series could really do with Jake. He's a big name, but also he can fight at welterweight and middleweight. So he's good for both divisions, you know what I mean? He's a big star name. So I really do think World Series could benefit from him. And the way they're spending the money, I think they're front runners. Now, Lex McMahon was on the Mixed Martial Arts Hour with Ariel Helwani. Now, he said Jake's given him the mandate to look for a promotion with a large viewing audience and, the best matchups. Who would you say is the best matchups and the largest viewing audience outside of the UFC?
I think Bellator is going to be where he's going to get his, more viewership and his best fights. Putting him in a tournament, it also means he's going to be able to make money. And like you said, if he can't make welterweight 3 times in 1 month to do a 170-pound tournament, he can do a 185-pound tournament. And there's a lot of guys in both divisions. I'd like to see how Alexander Shemelianko would stack up against Shields. But I also think if Jake Shields wants to have a couple good fights that might get him back in the UFC, World Series of Fighting, he can go fight Fitch, Paul Jarez, Okami, Steve Carl, Josh Berkman, and Jesse Taylor. Dave
Jesus.
Branch. If he can beat those guys, he can get back to the UFC. He's
That's
just
some
got to
big,
do it fast.
yeah, there's some big names there, and I do agree he can make it back to the UFC too. And but you mentioned Bellator. Now we all know why Ben Askren wasn't offered a deal by Bellator. They basically let him go as a free agent, and it was because he was a wet blanket. Basically, he was laying on people and hump drying them. Now some consider, Ben Askren one of the best. Top 10 definitely. Obviously, we can't prove that because he hasn't literally gone and fought the best, but we sort of felt he was there, if you know what I mean. And this really puts Bellator out the running for me. I think because they didn't want Askren, and he was their champion at the time, to release your champion on a free. Well, they didn't release him; they just let him go on a free. His contract ended. But to not offer your champion a new contract because of his fighting style, I just don't think there's any hope for Jake Shields. I really don't. I think Bellator have got a good solid base. They've got a solid base of fighters. So I just don't really see it happening, to be honest. I really don't. I don't think they need him. Now, we're talking about the big three here. We're talking about ONE FC. We're talking about World Series of Fighting. We're talking about Bellator. Now, apparently, Titan FC are offering shares in the company to Jake Shields to sign with them. If Jake Shields signs with Titan FC, they will give him shares in the company. How fucking crazy is that?
I thought you were going to ask me what his chances were of signing with them, and I was going to say they can't afford him.
Yeah.
My God, that is shares in the company to come fight for him.
Fucking shares in the company, and it was confirmed too. It was confirmed by his manager. Well, he didn't deny it. Let's put it that way.
Wow, we might see Jake Shields fighting a bunch of no-name guys at Titan Fighting Championship.
Could you imagine that? Well, them and Legacy have really been signing some fighters recently. They've been doing pretty well. Now, Titan are on CBS as well, so Jake Shields wants to be on a big viewing audience. Now, obviously, I'm in the UK. You're in Canada. I'm not too sure how big CBS is in the United States. We could have done with a American counterpart here to let us know, but we can't really discuss that one. Do you know much about CBS?
CBS is a big channel.
Yeah,
it is.
That'll suit him then. That's it. He wants a big audience.
And depending on how much those shares are worth, that could easily blow any offer out from Bellator or World Series of Fighting out of the water. My God.
Well, he's got to look at it now because he's got about 5 years left in this sport. Let's be honest. Because of his fighting style, the way he likes to control fighters, and he has to be extremely fit. Maybe 3 or 4 fighting the top level guys. So this could be really a nice offer for him right now. Something for him really to consider for his future. Because he's got to think about his 40s, his 50s, and a stake in a big company. But with Jake Shields behind it, as one of the men, could he? He knows fighters around gyms. He could help build this thing. It's really interesting. I personally don't think he will do it, but it's a nice offer to have there, and it wouldn't shock me. It really wouldn't shock me, because of his age, because he has to think about the future now. I wouldn't be surprised if he does do this, but I honestly believe that World Series of Fighting will be his home. And like you said, possibly ONE FC too. I spoke to Phil Baroni. He said the stadiums over there are absolutely massive. Well, it doesn't get much coverage in the United States, the UK, Canada, and whatnot. It is massive in Asia. Now, it's probably one of the biggest promotions. I think it is the biggest promotion over there now, and the rules are a little bit tricky. The stomps and whatnot in a cage, you're risking serious injury. Well, you are every time you step in the cage. They've got some good legit fighters over there too. Jake Shields wants to test himself. They have some really good fighters, but I believe like Ben Askren and Jake Shields, because of the wrestling, we all know that wrestling in mixed martial arts is the base to have. And when you're as good as Jake Shields and Ben Askren, it doesn't matter how much of a good kickboxer you are, fucking Muay Thai, they'll just double leg you and put you on your ass and you ain't getting back up. I don't care if you're fucking BJJ, fucking red belt, black and red belt, whatever you want to call it. You ain't doing shit once Jake Shields gets on top of you. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And one other thing, Greg, when you're talking about that offer that Jake Shields has from Titan, if you don't think he'll take it, To me,
Yeah,
I think it all depends on whether or not he wants to get back to the UFC. If he's willing to accept the fact that he's done with the UFC and he's never
yeah.
going to be the best in the world, you take that Titan offer because that is in the long term the better offer. Bellator isn't going to pay you any money when you're done fighting. Shares in a company are worth money when you're done.
I'll tell you what it does show. It shows the direction that Titan want to go. Because if you're looking for Jake Shields, I wouldn't have even considered him. Who would have considered Titan FC in the running for Jake Shields? Okay, let's move on to round 2, Derek. And Melvin Guillard signs with World Series of Fighting. Now, following a record of 1 win, 3 losses, and 1 no contest in his last 5 UFC bouts, Melvin Guillard was indeed released from the UFC. And that was roughly 3 weeks ago. Well, it hasn't took Melvin Guillard long to find a new home in mixed martial arts. He has indeed signed a multi-fight deal with World Series of Fighting. It was announced this past Monday, just literally 2 days ago. So we had some big news on Monday with Jake Shields and Melvin. But first off, Derek, what's your thoughts on Melvin signing with World Series of Fighting?
This is awesome. There's some young prospects in World Series of Fighting who could get that huge boost from fighting Melvin Guillard. He might have been coming out of the UFC on a bit of a losing skid, but he's still a
Yeah.
named fighter. He's still good. If even one of those young lightweight prospects that World Series of Fighting has beats him, that could literally be let's sign this guy from Joe Silva.
Yeah, I like it too. I think it's a really good move for him. Like, I think if he went to Bellator, that would have been too much for him. They've got literally. I was looking at the roster. They've got a roster of fucking killers, man. They really have. It's absolutely stacked. I think if he faced the full roster at Bellator, I think he would lose to half of that roster easily, if not more.
Honestly, Melvin Guillard would never win a tournament in Bellator. And I'd make that prediction flat out, and I'd bet anyone.
Yeah.
He would.
Now,
any tournament they've done with any fighters they've been in them, he would not win one.
World Series of Fighting, I think they've got good fighters. They've got some really good fighters, which he could certainly beat and hang with, definitely. And actually where he could fight for a title too. But they've also got a lot of up-and-coming young guys, like you mentioned, undefeated records, who we can really, have some really good fights with. It's just, it's new, it's exciting, and they're more around his level, you know what I mean? Bellator is just too much for him, Smart move by Melvin. Obviously, I don't know how much money played a factor. I think World Series of Fighting would have offered more money than Bellator. Well, I suppose that is the next question, really, Derek. Obviously, this all comes down to money. What sort of money do you think he's actually on at World Series? Do you think he's on what he was at the UFC, possibly? Do you think he's on a little bit more, around the same? Do you think he's on less than what he was at on the UFC?
I honestly would sure hope it's less than I'm pretty sure he had a pretty good contract with the UFC. I could see him making a solid, probably what Paul Harris is making. I guess in World Series of Fighting, that's a pretty good contract though, about $50,000.
50 grand, yeah. I think he was on 40,000 at the UFC. I'm sure it was 40,000, which is pretty badass, to be honest with you. I seriously think that he's probably getting paid more, to be honest, at World Series. Really, I really do. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I do not know. But I remember an interview with James McSweeney. He said that he agreed everything with Ray Sefo about signing with World Series and fighting Tyrone Spong. Obviously, they was offering Tyrone Spong a lot more money, but James McSweeney felt like he had more of a name in mixed martial arts than Tyrone Spong did, so he wanted the same amount of money. Now, Ali Abdulaziz didn't agree. So it was all agreed. The next day, Ali Abdulaziz, he actually come back and said, no, it ain't happening. And you see what happened with Vinny Magalhaes. He was kicking off with Vinny Magalhaes on Twitter. He's like, you ain't getting this. You lost to a 40-year-old. So he sort of takes no shit, this Ali Aziz, So, well, it looks like they're splashing out money. He's certainly not a stupid guy. With Ali in charge, I think he'll run the books just about right. I don't think he'll overspend. Maybe he'll spend a bit on, certain names to boost up the the level of the promotion. Like Melvin Guillard signing, it's big news. keeps World Series of Fighting in the news. People are interested. But I don't think he'll go over the top. He's not going to go signing like Tito Ortiz on crazy money or something like that. He's not going to be bringing in Kevin Randleman on fucking 30,000. Just stupid shit like that. I don't think he's like that. I think he's a very savvy businessman.
I would hope that he wouldn't go, like, we've seen so many MMA promotions go out of business so fast because they spend money they don't have.
Yeah.
Like, James McSweeney's a nobody in MMA. Like, he fought on the Ultimate Fighter. He fought on the Ultimate Fighter and got his ass kicked. Okay, good for you.
Good for you.
Guys, yeah. Tyrone Spong is gonna murder this guy. You can find some no-name guy for Tyrone Spong to murder and pay him $3,000. Like, paying James McSweeney what Tyrone Spong would make would be idiotic. That is just, you might as well just, start making it rain for every fighter if you're gonna just like that. I think, by the sounds of it, this guy is smart, and just from you saying that, I don't think he's gonna overpay Melvin. I don't think Melvin's making more than what he was in the UFC.
Well, there's some good fights for him. There's Justin Gaethje, the champion. There's JZ Calvin Canty. There's Tyson Griffin. Dan Lawson will be a good little fun one. I quite like Dan Lawson. He's always entertaining, brings it. That'll be a good first fight for him. I don't believe they should stick him straight into a title fight, but I think someone like Calvin Canty or Dan Lawson, I think that's a good fight. Who would you place him against in his first fight?
I love the Dan Lawson fight. But if not that fight, Tyson Griffin.
Okay, let's move on to our third and final round. Gina Carano set to meet with Dana White later tonight. By the time we get this recording out, Derek, we'll probably know if she's signed with the UFC or not and how the actual talks went tonight. But let's discuss it anyway and see if we can get some stuff right here, Derek. Now, first off, the question on everyone's lips, will Gina Carano fight in the UFC? Yes or no, Derek?
Yeah, I'm going to say no.
Reasons?
She hasn't fought in 5 years. I don't honestly think her name in MMA is going to pull in a lot of viewers anymore.
No?
It's 5 years. She was doing decent numbers with Strikeforce, or was it Strikeforce or Elite XC?
Both.
Yeah,
it was more Elite XC. It was Elite XC, but obviously when they co-promoted, it was a last fight with Cyborg fell under their Strikeforce banner.
Right, so she was doing decent numbers with them half a decade ago. By the time they announced a fight and book a fight with Ronda Rousey, it would have been 5 years since she fought last. That is horrific. No fighter should get a title shot, and that's what Gina Carano is going to want after a 5-year layoff. It would be ridiculous. I don't think Dana White is going to make that mistake. I hope not, anyways. I don't think Gina Carano and Ronda Rousey are going to do any better than do any better than Ronda Rousey and Sarah McMahon did, and they only broke 400,000 pay-per-view buys.
Well, it seems like she wasn't even intent on coming back. It was more of this Joe Rogan thing. As soon as Joe Rogan opened his mouth, all of a sudden everyone starts talking about Carano coming back. Then she gets contacted. Then it sort of puts, fighting back in her mind. And then Dana White reveals she's still under contract off the old Strikeforce deal. So it's like, well, she must have been under Strikeforce then. But it's like, she wasn't even thinking about coming back fighting. So literally, Joe Rogan could have literally stirred this all up. No, you say that she's been away for 5 years, Derek, but the UFC, they really know how to promote. They have the audience, they have the TV audience to promote this. They have the viewers to promote this. Like, if they can promote this Patrick Cummins, who was literally a fighter that nobody knew about, to fight Daniel Cormier. Now, I mention this a lot because it was really interesting because it showed how much the UFC know how to market a fighter and get a good story across. They've always done that, Not many people would have pulled off like Brock Lesnar, They would have done it wrong. They did it in a really good way. And, he's out in the woods, he's hunting. Even when he got ill, they're showing the hospital footage on him, going for his operation. It's nearly life-threatening injury. Can he come back and be dominant? They just really know how to put a spin on things. If she did come back, I really think that they could really spin it pretty well, to be honest with you. And plus, they own all the footage from her old fights, so...
I get where you're coming with that. But what spin are they going to put on it? This chick was the
Um,
face WMMA when no one cared about WMMA. She was hot and people wanted to see her fight, and that was it. And now Ronda Rousey's going to rip her in half. Like,
see,
I don't think any new fans are, like, not even new fans, but I don't think a lot of people are signing to see that fight. And then, they're going to put Ronda Rousey on pay-per-view because Dana White considers her the pay-per-view darling. If you
so, well,
want that fight,
this would have to be pay-per-view, Derek, guaranteed if it went down.
That's what they would do. If you want to do this fight, right, you put it on Fox. Then everyone's going to watch it. Everybody. Ronda Rousey, there's going to be, 400,000 people are going to tune in to watch it. You might get 10 million people might tune into Fox to watch Gina Carano fight, but people don't want to pay to see your fight.
How about this one? How about this one, Derek? Gina Carano versus somebody else on like a Fox card, just like a warm-up fight, like maybe a Shayna Baszler or something. She's a decent name, but it's a nice warm-up fight. But then again, Shayna Baszler wouldn't, it wouldn't warrant a title shot. You're better off just coming in straight away after 5 years out and getting a title shot than beating. No disrespect to Shayna Baszler, I really respect her, but obviously she's just coming off the Ultimate Fighter, a couple of injuries. That isn't a fight that would really set you up for a title shot.
Honestly, Greg,
yeah,
if they're gonna bring Gina Carano in, if she's willing to do a warm-up fight, I don't care who she beats, but if she fights, give her a title shot. Fine. I'd way rather them do that than just give her a title fight off a 5-year-long layoff. But I do not think with the amount of money she's making, unless all of a sudden she misses MMA and she wants to do this full-time again, that she's going to come back for multiple fights. She's going to come back for a big paycheck against Ronda Rousey, and if she doesn't get what she wants, she's not fighting in the UFC. But for me, honestly, if she's going to get all this and Dana's thinks she's going to pull a huge pay-per-view number, or Gina Carano's going to be climbing out from underneath Dana White's desk, wiping her mouth if she gets what she wants.
He's going to give us some milk there with a bit of cream.
Exactly.
Well, if it did happen, the Carano versus Ronda Rousey bout, I think it would be bigger than Miesha Tate versus Ronda Rousey. And to me, that was the biggest women's fight so far. Especially the way the UFC did it with the whole season, rematch, she broke her arm. They didn't like each other. So for me, that was the biggest women's mixed martial arts fight to date. And I actually feel like if Carano came back, this would actually be bigger. Now, I'm taking it you don't agree with that.
For me, I think the biggest fight in WMMA ever was Gina Carano versus Chris Cyborg when they were both, in their primes.
Yeah.
Even though WMMA wasn't nearly as popular back then, that was still the biggest fight.
Yeah.
But as far as, pay-per-view in UFC goes, yeah, Ronda versus Miesha was. But you never know how good that fight actually would have drawn because it was a co-main event to Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman. And that card still didn't do as good as everyone thought it was going to do. I honestly don't think Ronda Rousey's capable of drawing in more than 500,000. So the Gina fight might do a little better than the, Sarah McMahon fight. But, it probably won't do as big as Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey too. But you never know. A lot of people wanted to see Silva and Weidman fight, not Ronda and Miesha.
I've just thought of something here, Derek. Now, you mentioned how would the UFC spin this. Basically, now Ronda Rousey, she transformed into the bad guy, the heel. People want to see her get beat now. First it was like, can anybody escape her armbar? She's really good, But now people want to see her get her ass whooped. And especially after, the Sarah McMahon finish where she, a lot of people felt it shouldn't have been stopped. She's really turning hated at the minute. And now Gina Carano, she's really like the fan favorite. Everybody loves Gina Carano. She's been in the movies. She's got that big smiley, happy face. She's like the ultimate super fucking good girl. You know what I mean? It's like everyone would root for Gina to fucking destroy Ronda Rousey. But then there's the hardcore fans who like, you spent all this time away. They'd be like, Ronda Rousey's the next big thing. Step aside. Hope she fucking rips your arm off. So there's a good spin right away, Derek. Would you agree?
That's exactly what they would have to go with. But that's going to be the spin that put on every Ronda Rousey.
But then again, do you know what? I'm actually contradicting myself here because I was talking before about the belts. It should be about the belts and not, the fun fights. Now I'm actually contradicting myself here, Derek. So maybe it is about both things, to be honest with you.
See, and another thing we're not even considering, who says it's going to be for the belt? Gina Carano had troubles making 145, and she's bigger now that she's been away. Not saying she's fat or nothing, but she's obviously, it's going to be almost impossible for her to make 35. So if this fight does happen, it might be a 140, 145 fight. And that just, that's stirring another pot. That's why can't she fight Chris Cyborg at 145, but she'll fight Gina Carano? What's that garbage all about?
I don't think Carano would want the belt, to be honest with you. Because like you mentioned, if she does do this, it's going to be like a super fight. You know what I mean? I just don't think she's going to come back full time. I don't think her heart's there no more. Because I think she's moved on with her acting career and whatnot. Maybe that's dried up a little bit, but I just feel like she moved on from fighting. Maybe she wants to end on a win or go out, just come back one more time because she maybe has unfinished business or, maybe she wants to test herself against a new wave of women. But she's got a 7-1 record, and I just think there's unfinished business from Gina, but not to the extent where she wants a big long run in the UFC. So you could be onto something there. I think she would take, not because of the weight cut, because I can believe, like if they give her a good 6 to 9 months to prepare, I believe she could make the weight because she started off her career at 135, and then she started gradually moving up. But she was always a small 145. She always coming around 141. Her last fight against Cyborg, I think she was on the nail, like 145, 146. But, yeah, it's like, if they're going to do it, though, Derek, it's got to be like, they've got to do it now. They have to do it now because Holly Holm's being mentioned. Now, as soon as Holly Holm signs for the UFC, she's getting a title shot. And there's a very real possibility that Holly Holm could defeat Ronda Rousey. And if she does, that just destroys any Gina Carano fight.
Like you said, Greg, we're gonna know tonight whether this is happening or not.
Yeah.
And Dana, he's always sees the money signs, so it might happen. I'll watch it. I loved Gina Carano 5 years ago. She was one of my favorites, and she was super hot. But I don't.
You just want to see him wrestle around in the knickers and bra, Derek, you dirty man.
Who doesn't, right? Like, I'd pay money for that. They can go, what was that? I posted that video on the Crib. The Lingerie Fighting Championships.
Yeah.
I'd rather pay for that than, Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano can headline that.
Well, could you imagine this though, Derek? If she fights Gina Carano next, and then she faces Holly Holm, and then finishes off against Cyborg Santos, I literally think, because Ronda Rousey's already said she doesn't want to stick around mixed martial arts too long. You know what I mean? So she's already planning a escape route from mixed martial arts, and she's pretty much going the same way as Gina Carano into the movies. You know what I mean? And obviously there's more money in the movies. So, well, apparently, I'm not too sure. I'm not big and savvy on the movies and whatnot, and how it all works. But it always seems.
I'm sorry, but why would she fight Holly Holm and then Chris Cyborg? She's got to fight Kat Zingano and Alexis Davis before those fights happen. That's the thing. That's another thing I hate about the Gina fight. Is just pushing everything back more.
That's a good point. But I don't think that Alexis Davis looked too great in the last fight. I was actually pushing for Alexis Davis to get a title shot, but just didn't look too good last time. Jessica Ai's been impressing me, but obviously a couple more wins, I think. At least one more good solid one. I don't know if that's 2 good solid ones. And Kat Zingano, I just think she's lost her husband. She's saying that she wants to come back, but I just don't think she's ready. I think she should take a little bit more time off, to be honest. She's suffered some serious news. She's coming off a serious injury. I just don't think, But then again, listen, I don't live with the woman. I don't speak to her every day. she could be doing fine. A title fight could just be what she needs right now to get in the gym, get her leg back strong, feel good.
Well,
Who knows?
keep her mind off it.
Yeah.
I don't know Kat Zingano personally either, so who knows?
But
But
the thing is, though,
Ronda
Derek.
Rousey's not fighting again till August.
Yeah, but Kat Zingano's going to be around for years, though. You know what I mean? She's like, but yeah, drop though, because we're sitting fighting. People can lose the title shots. Look at Dan Henderson. You know what I mean? I don't really want to see Kat Zingano lose a title shot because she's badass at the minute. Let's be honest. So I just want to see Carano so bad. I just want to see the Carano fight so bad. I want to see Holly Holm. I want to see Cyborg. I want to see Kat Zingano.
See, now how about this? Because like you said yourself, Gina Carano isn't gonna come back and fight Ronda Rousey on a 3 months notice. So let her fight Ronda Rousey versus Kat Zingano in August. Ronda wins. Well, should win. Then she fights Gina Carano in December. That gives Gina Carano 8 months to prepare for the fight.
Yeah.
And then Ronda and Gina can fight in December on the end of the year card. Hell, make that the co-headline and put Johnny Hendricks versus Tyrone Woodley or something as the main event. That's a huge card.
That's just bringing in other fighters, though. I don't like it when other fighters get bought into the mix. I like it when a woman can sell a fight herself, to be honest. And to me, Ronda Rousey does that. I don't think she needs another fight around her to help build it up. Like 2 very good fights. I think she's an excellent fighter as it is. She's the champion. She's really built a name for herself. She's the woman to beat, to be honest with you. And I think pretty much just Ronda Rousey on her own. I think unless she's really fighting somebody like who's you're really struggling to promote, then yeah, you need to bring in another name, obviously. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of using other fighters to push it up. I understand where it has to happen sometimes. You need a good solid core-main event. Some core-main events I've seen what probably outweighed the main event itself, to be honest. But yeah, I just don't think Ronda Rousey needs that right now, especially with all these challenges she's got.
Well, I get where you're coming from, but Ronda Rousey just did I think half the pay-per-view buys she was supposed to do against Sarah McMahon.
Wow.
Yeah, it was only 400,000. People were saying it should be, upwards towards 1 million. I think Ronda Rousey is getting a lot more hype than she's worth when it comes to selling pay-per-views. I still don't think there's a lot of people who want to see her fight.
Do you think it's more the UFC's hype rather than actual fans' hype?
Yes, it's a lot of Dana White running his mouth. He said Ronda Rousey's their biggest pay-per-view star. I think John Jones would have something to say about that. I think Cain Velasquez would have something to say about that.
Well, it's sort of like the Chuck and Tito back in the day. Like, you would always think that Tito would be the same sort of draw as Chuck, but it really turned out in the end that Chuck was actually a bigger draw. I think Randy Couture was a bigger draw than Tito Ortiz. But you would always think because of the way Tito presented himself, he was always, flash and, the flames and just a bad boy image. You would always think that he was like the poster boy. He sort of was for many years in the old UFC, but he always seemed to think that he carried it on. And the UFC they knew behind the scenes that he wasn't the top draw anymore, but, they always still sort of used him and pretended he was. But we all sort of knew the main guys was Chuck and Randy, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a theory with that. And you know how, I think Josh Koscheck said it, people might not like me, but they'll pay to see me fight, because he's the bad guy and you want to root against him. People don't always want to pay to root against someone. They have to want to see the person who's going to beat you. And that's what happened with Chuck and Tito. No one liked Tito, so no one wanted to see him fight on his own. But when it was like, oh, I want to see Chuck knock Tito out, and then everyone wanted to see it. It's the same with Ronda Rousey. Most people want to see her lose. Not a lot of people tuned in to see Sarah McMahon fight her. And to me, Sarah McMahon was her biggest fight, and she walked through it.
Skill-wise, definitely. But that's a good theory, Derek. Actually, I think there's a lot of weight behind that, to be honest. I really like that. I actually think you're 95% true there, if not more. Okay, that's all from us today. Don't forget to check out MMAequip.com. From MMA Equip's Fighting Talk, thank you for watching.